Welcome everyone to our hangout this evening on Saturday night with Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii and Schmidt Ocean Institute's Research Vessel Falkor. We are so excited to have Falkor join us live from Palmyra Atoll. That is in the Pacific. They've been doing work here in Hawaii and over in Palmyra looking at ancient coral reefs. And they've been doing this with ROV Sebastian. We have Ken Rubin here with us and Haunani, who's going to take over. I'll pass it over to the ship.
Aloha, Sustainable Coastlines and Nakamakai Ohana. This is Haunani and Dr. Ken Rubin, and we got some of our other crew here. And we are on the RV Falkor. The boat looks like this. This is a Lego replica, but we are just making our way back home to Hawaii from Palmyra Atoll. It's about 1,000 miles south of the Hawaiian Islands. And I can't really see all of your guys' faces, but I know I recognize a lot of you if I was there. Oh man. But yeah, so we just spent about the past 2 weeks. Hi Kala. Hi Kahi. Yeah, so we just spent the past week down at Palmyra with an ROV, which is like a little robot. And we're going down to about 300 to 600 feet looking for fossil corals. And I'm sorry, but I can't hear what you guys are saying. So if you want me to stop talking at any time so you can ask a question, just give me a signal. You can wave. Kala, do you have a question? No? Okay. Ken, do you want to explain to them a little more? No. Hi, Kahi. Do you have any questions? No? Oh, if you guys have questions, you can type it for us, or I can just keep on talking. Where is Palmyra? So Palmyra is about 6 degrees north of the equator. So we're right above the equator. It's about 1,000 miles south of Hawaii. And we've been talking a lot about Hokulea at our Nakamakai camps. So Hokulea actually sailed down there. They navigated down there and sailed back. And I think it took them a couple weeks to make it back to Hawaii. But for us, we're estimating about 3 or 4 days. Okay, so I'll tell you guys a little bit more about what we were doing down here in Palmyra. We had 2 study sites, and this research is being led by Dr. Ken Rubin, who is here in the room with us. And what we do is we take these this ROV, this little robot that's attached to a cable, and it's attached to the back of the ship right here. And what happens is we have a bunch of pilots. So like an airplane, we've got people that are driving the ROV from inside of the ship, and we have all these computer screens like this, and we're able to watch with live video. We're able to watch what the seafloor looks like. So we're looking for these old fossil corals that are about 10 to 20,000 years old. And they formed after the last ice age. They were growing in shallow environments off of Molokai. Okay, I'm getting there. I'll tell you why, but so we're studying these corals because we're learning about how different pulses and floodwaters from the ice age flooded the area. And by studying the corals, we can get an idea of when that happened and what the environment, how it changed. And Dr. Ken Rubin could explain it a little better. Yes. So my job on this trip is just being here to help with the rest of the students. And once the corals come up on the ship, we clean them and get them ready so they can be dated. And while the robot or the ROV is down in the water, we're taking note of what types of corals we're seeing, what types of animals we're seeing, as well as what depths we're sampling at. And we saw lots of sharks and lots of eels, a bunch of fish, big uluas, some manta rays, big octopuses, and lots of pretty corals and sand. So we had a question about how different it is to be on one of these big research boats compared to sailing on a smaller canoe. And it's actually really different. We were up on the deck the other day and I saw a bunch of squalls coming through and it started raining. And I was thinking about if we were on the canoe and if we were trying to navigate, we'd have to stand in the rain and we'd have to stand in the wind and we'd be cold. But I actually could go downstairs and have a coffee and stay dry. So that was nice. I'm going to hand it over to Ken. He'll answer your questions about climate change.
Hey, everyone. Thanks very much, Haunani. So what we're doing on this trip is, in a way, using the ROV is like snorkeling. We're snorkeling in a coral reef. It's just a coral reef that formed a long time ago. And what we're trying to prove has to do with, or trying to study has to do with sort of how fast sea level changed, and we're trying to use that to make predictions about the future. So we've gotten partway through that research by taking this trip, meaning we've done a lot of video observations, we've collected samples that we're going to bring back to the lab and determine how old they are. So we won't know if we've made any sort of gigantic new discoveries about climate change that we didn't already know until we get the full results in. But what we do know is that we went to a brand new site at Palmyra Island that no one has been to before. As far as we know, we're the first people that have seen this place. And we found a really beautiful fossil coral reef, one that formed, something like 10 to 20,000 years ago. And the corals look, except for the fact that they're kind of green and covered with some other stuff that's been growing on top of them over the last 10,000 years, they look beautiful. They look like a modern coral.
Okay, so there's a question about how we get kids involved in doing the sorts of things that we're doing here on the boat. So if any of you guys are interested in coming out to see the Falkor, the research vessel that we're on right now, you can, and the ROV, see the robot that we're using, you can actually come down on Sunday, October 1st from 10 to 4, and they'll be giving public tours. And you guys can check everything out. I'm planning on being down here with my nephews. They really want to see the boat. So if any of the kids need rides, like, yeah. And Ken will be doing a display showing some of the different samples that we've collected and that have been possibly collected on previous trips. Yes. Yeah, so there'll be videos, pictures. You can meet the crew. You can see possibly where we live while we're on the ship. And it's gonna be at the UH Marine facility, which is across the street from Costco and Best Buy and kind of by Nico's restaurant. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Oh yeah, so for school-wise, if you want to come and, okay, how do you find the fossil sites? Okay. Okay, so I'll finish that first question. So for all of the Nakomakai Alaka'i, if you guys want to come and be on a ship like this one day, you need to come to all of your Alaka'i camps Just joking. No, it's good to just do well in school. You got to have math, you got to have science, and you just got to be really motivated and go to college.
What did you do? What was your path to get to where you are?
I think they know my path because I tell them all the time.
This is live.
Oh, me too. Okay, should I continue with this?
Oh, well, they just asked about Molokai. That's because people think it's
Yeah. You on it? Okay.
That also asked about how we find the fossil.
Yeah, so I'll answer the first question about Molokai. So this study that we're doing here on the Falkor, it has 2 sites. So the first site is Penguin Banks. So that's off of Molokai, and it's actually in the Kaiwi Channel. It's a shallow platform relative to the rest of the channel, and it's one of the sites that Dr. Ken Rubin has been diving at, and we've been seeing these massive heads of Paredes corals and just beds of corals, types of corals that you typically would see along the shoreline or in the shallow areas off of Molokai, but we're finding them at about like 300 to 600 feet, which tells us that they didn't form there. They didn't form at those depths. They formed at shallower depths at a time when sea level was lower. And you want to tell them about how you find the fossil corals?
Yeah, so, those of you who snorkel around the island, or maybe your parents do some scuba diving, that if you go around the island of Oahu, that the corals that grow there's some places where you expect to see, good coral reef, and places where you don't see very much. And so what we do to try and figure out where we might find a ancient coral reef is with our mind, we strip away some sea level and we look at what the land looks like when sea level was lower, and we find the kinds of places, the calm bays, the headlands, where we would expect to see coral today, and then we go look in those places that are now underwater 300 to 600 feet, like how Nani said. And sometimes we find really awesome stuff, sometimes we don't. Not every place has a great coral reef now or in the past, but that's been a pretty successful strategy for us. We've been working at Penguin Bank for about 10 years. And another colleague at UH Manoa, Chip Fletcher, who's the Associate Dean of the School for SOAS, that's our school that we're in. And he's played a really important role because he's a coastal geologist, and he knows where the good corals are going to be, where the reefs are. And so together we sort of picked some sites, and we picked the sites down in Palmyra the same way, sort of like, hey, this place looks like it should have had a coral reef 10,000 years ago. Let's go check it out. And that's what we did. And it was there.
Where did all the water?
We had period, and in Hawaii and near the equator, like at Palmyra, it wasn't cold in the Ice Age. It was actually just like today, except the sea level was lower. And the reason the sea level was lower is because all that water got put onto the continents in big, thick ice sheets. That's why they call it the Ice Age. So, that happens every 100,000 years or so on the planet. It warms and it cools, and it warms and it cools, and we take water out of the oceans when it gets cold, and we put it into the ice sheets on the land. And then it melts again, and it tends to melt really fast, and the sea level comes back up. And this happens all around the world, but in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, it's a really great place to study it. Hawaii and for sure, and now we think also Palmyra have some of the best records during the last ice age of any place that I'm aware of. Any other questions? You want to know what we had for dinner tonight? Yes. All right, fire away. Well, so they have like a buffet, and they always have lots of choices. So I had pasta and some fruit and some Brussels sprouts. What did you have, Haunani?
Yeah, I had some of, we had like a beef pot roast. So I had that, and then we had leftover cheesecake from lunch. It's really good.
What else can you find out?
So the really cool thing about coral reefs is that they have lots of different species of coral living on them, and some species can take different shapes or forms depending on what the ocean is like there. If there are a lot of waves, if there aren't very many waves, for instance. And so by looking not only at individual corals, but all the corals that are living together on a reef, we can say a lot about the environment, and we can try and do that same thing in the past. So when we go to these fossil reef locations, and this is something we've been doing at Penguin Bank for a while now, is we look at all the different kinds of corals, and we know something about how sea level was changing, and it allows us to say things like, ooh, how are coral reefs going to change due to sea level rise? Are some of the species of coral that live there going to do better than others? And so far we think we already know that that's the case. And so that's another thing that you can say about climate from coral. There's another sort of thing that you can do that isn't my particular expertise, but we have colleagues at other places that do this, which is, you know, corals, just like trees, they have tree rings in them. And so you can get annual records of sort of like how things changed on the planet every year over the time period that coral grew. So for instance, we can tell the temperature of seawater, we can tell how salty the seawater was, and that comes from measuring the chemistry of the coral skeleton really precisely, you know, sort of every year. So that's something else that we plan to have someone else do with the samples we're collecting on this expedition.
Can you talk about the artist at sea who was with us on Lake One, and then also explain a bit, because there's a question about how they all the artist at sea program. So talk about what Tasha was doing on Lake One, and then also that there's an application process. Okay.
So yeah, one of the really nice things for me as a scientist coming to sea with Schmidt Ocean Institute is that they have a couple of programs. One is called Student at Sea, and one is called Artist at Sea. And so people from all over the world apply and express their interest in participating in one of those programs. And then there's a selection process. And so as part of this expedition, we've had 2 students at sea that were part of this program and an artist at sea. And they all contributed in very important ways to the research. It was really fun, especially to have an artist, to see her perspective. Her name was Natasha. She came from Scotland. This was very different for her to be in a place in the tropics. You know, she comes from a very cold place, and she was fascinated with all the aspects of the research, not only sort of what we were finding out, but how we do it. And she made a beautiful set of paintings that sort of depicted each aspect of the research from her perspective. It was really nice to see that. And if any of you are interested, or you know someone in your family or a friend who wants to apply for this program, you know, every year Schmidt has a application process, and I think it would be great to have some Hawaii participants in the program. There have been Hawaii participants in the past, but let's continue that tradition. The ROV, yeah, so the ROV, the question is what kind of measurements does the ROV make? It's, and it's an incredible thing, right? So it takes 4 people to sort of drive it and run all the various systems. There's one person who's just doing the navigation, just listening on a sonar system to know exactly where it is. There's a person who's driving the vehicle. There's another person who's controlling the robot arms, which is, they're called manipulators, and that's how the sampling is done. There's another person who controls all the cameras and the video, and you can put on all sorts of other devices. And so we have temperature probes that tell us how salty the water is, what the depth is very precisely. It makes a pressure measurement. There's a probe that tells us what's the oxygen in the water. So we can do a full water quality assessment in real time. It's coming up when we're in the control van, and there's screens all over the place. So sometimes it's like a little bit difficult to decide which screen to look at. There's a screen that's telling us sonar, sort of what's around us. There's a huge number of cameras. So there's the one that we've been streaming live, which is the pilot camera, but they've got cameras pointing at every different aspect of the ROV. And one of the funny things about the control room, there's some seats for scientists that, you know, we sit in there, and a lot of the people like to look at the camera that's going behind the ROV, because you always see like sharks and various fish. And, you know, of course, I would like to be looking at that stuff too, but I got to be looking at the forward camera where we're doing the science. So it's always a little bit envious of not being able to look back. But yeah, we do have a lot of different measurements, and different science teams that use the ROV can put different kinds of instruments on there. They can get measurements of, you know, what kind of bacteria are living in the water, for instance, and those kinds of things. Yeah, so, you know, the ROV is connected to a ship by cable, and it's a really fancy, expensive cable that can be able to transmit all this information really quickly from the vehicle back up to the ship. So while they could drop it really fast, there's a chance that it wouldn't be so good for the cable, and the vehicle might bump into the ground. So they drop it down in kind of a very controlled manner. At these depths, and most people consider this really shallow, like about as shallow as you'd want to take an ROV. It takes like, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes to get down to the bottom. And that's about the same length of time it takes when we go in the manned subs that the Hawaii Undersea Research Lab runs at the University of Hawaii. Like a 20-minute trip down to the bottom. And then it takes them a little bit of time to sort of figure out where they are, and they have to adjust a bunch of stuff with the vehicle, like the buoyancy. They want it to be, you know, not too heavy, not too light, so they descend with some weights, and they drop off a few weights just so that the vehicle drives nicely. A lot of the research that I do tends to be in much deeper water, and I'm going to be back on this ship in about a month doing a project in the Kingdom of Tonga. Tonga is, you know, it's in the southern hemisphere. It's kind of near the equator. It's near the country of Samoa. It's also near Fiji. And on that program, we're going to be going much deeper, like 10 to 20 times deeper. And so for those dives, it'll take about an hour or maybe even a little bit more, hour and 15 minutes to get down to the bottom. So during that time, we'll have a little bit more time to prepare and so forth for the observations that we're going to be making.
So we wanted to thank you guys for all of your work that you guys have done out at Makua. It's such a beautiful and special place. While we've been out here at sea, we've had a lot of really calm days. So we've had the opportunity to scan the surface of the ocean, and we haven't seen very much in the way of any marine debris. But we were just wondering if you guys could give us a little bit of an idea of some of the stuff that you guys have found at Makua this past weekend. If it was a pretty successful cleanup, I think you guys have one more day tomorrow to also work out there. Just ask them about what they collected.
Wow, look at that. Yeah, were those tires there? That's amazing. Great work. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Oh, it's hard to see that image. Oh. Awesome. That's great. That's really, really great work that you guys are doing. So someone asked if we can tell about coral bleaching in the past. And unfortunately, we can't actually tell about that, because what happens when coral bleaches is, you know, there's actually two organisms living in a piece of coral. There's something that can exit the coral, and that's what happens during bleaching. And now that we're looking at like 10,000-year-old fossil corals, all that stuff's already gone. And so we can't tell if it's gone because of a bleaching event or it's just gone because the thing is dead. So yeah, we can't tell that one, unfortunately. So yeah, we have just a few more minutes. I don't know if anyone's got any questions. It's been great sharing a little bit of our experiences with you. But if you do have some additional questions, something for Haunani, for instance, or me, you know, or other people who are sitting in the room, just shout it out by text. That looks great. Yeah. Thank you guys. I hope we have a good night. I hope the weather is good over there.
Mahalo, you guys. Best of luck tomorrow. And again, thank you so much for all that you guys have done for Makua and all of the cleanups that you guys do across the state, as well as all of the events that you guys put on for all of the kids around Oahu. I miss you guys. See you guys next week for everyone that will, or next month for everyone that'll be at the next Nakamakai. Hi, Kai Po'i. See you guys later. Love you guys. Or over here.